The phone rang at 3:07 a.m., and before I even looked at the screen, my body knew something was wrong. There's a certain way silence sits in a room at that hour. Heavy. Final. Like the world has agreed to pause breathing. I'd been half asleep, drifting in that shallow space where thoughts blur into static, when the vibration rattled against the nightstand. Too loud. Too sharp. My heart jumped like it had been waiting for permission. I almost ignored it. That's the part that still bothers me. My first instinct wasn't panic. It was annoyance. Tomorrow was a workday. A presentation I wasn't ready for. Another week of pretending I had things under control. I reached for the phone with the reflex of a man trained to manage problems later. Then I saw the caller ID. My son. Not my wife. Not her parents. My son. No 7-year-old calls his father at 3 in the morning unless the world he knows has cracked open. I sat up so fast the sheets tangled around my legs. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, already scanning the dark room like answers might be hiding in the corners. There was breathing on the other end. Uneven. Well, like he was trying not to be heard. "Dad?" he said. His voice wasn't crying. That scared me more. "Don't trust Mom's family." The sentence landed wrong. Like a sentence spoken out of order. I waited for him to laugh, to say he'd had a bad dream, to hand the phone to an adult who would apologize for waking me. None of that happened. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady the way men do when they're afraid of falling apart. Silence. Then quieter, "You have to promise." My chest tightened. "Promise what?" "Promise you won't tell them I called you." I looked at the digital clock glowing on my dresser. 3:08 a.m. 8 minutes into a day that would change everything. "I promise," I said. Another pause. I could hear something in the background. A floorboard. A distant cough. My imagination filled in shadows I didn't want to see. "They watch," he whispered. "They always watch." "Who does?" His breath hitched. "Dad, please. Just come. Please come before morning." I swung my legs off the bed. The cold floor bit into my feet, grounding me in a way fear never does. "I'm coming," I said. "Right now." "No," he said quickly. "Don't say it out loud." That stopped me. I lowered my voice even more. "I won't." Another sound. Closer this time. My son inhaled sharply. "Dad," he said, and for the first time his voice broke. "Don't believe them." The call ended. No goodbye. No explanation. Just dead air and the soft hum of the phone against my ear. I sat there for a second too long, staring at nothing. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I realized my hands were shaking. I can't remember the last time that happened. Somewhere along the way, between promotions and deadlines and the quiet erosion of marriage, I'd trained myself out of instinct. Out of urgency. I'd learned how to stay calm even when I shouldn't. But this cut straight through the version of myself I'd built. I stood up and started moving before my brain caught up. Jeans. Shirt. Jacket. My motions were automatic, like muscle memory from a life where reacting fast still mattered. As I pulled on my shoes, I noticed something strange. I wasn't thinking about work. Not the presentation. Not the client. Not the emails waiting to pile up by morning. For the first time in years, none of it existed. All I could see was my son's face the last time I dropped him off at his grandparents' house. How he'd hugged me longer than usual. How he'd asked casually, "You're coming back soon, right?" I'd laughed then. Told him of course. Always did. Lies don't always sound like lies when you say them often enough. I grabbed my keys and froze by the bedroom door. My wife was asleep on her side of the bed, turned away from me. The steady rise and fall of her breathing felt foreign, like we were sharing space instead of a life. For a second, I wondered if I should wake her. The thought died as soon as it formed. My son hadn't called her. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. I stepped into the hallway, easing the door shut behind me. The house creaked in its sleep. Family photos lined the walls, smiling versions of us, frozen in moments that looked happier than they felt. I passed one from last Christmas. My son on his grandparents' couch, stiff smile, eyes not quite meeting the camera. I'd missed that then. I wouldn't miss it again. Outside the night was still. Too still. The kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts sound louder than they should. As I got into the car, my phone buzzed. A text. A known number. For a split second, my stomach dropped. It was nothing. An automated message offering a loan I didn't need. But the fear stayed. I started the engine and pulled out onto the empty road. Streetlights passed in slow rhythm, each one illuminating the same question I couldn't shake. What had my son seen that I hadn't? I replayed his words again and again. Don't trust mom's family. Not something happened. Not I'm scared. A warning. Deliberate. Warnings don't come from nowhere. As the city thinned into darker stretches of road, another thought crept in. One I didn't like. Why hadn't he called me sooner? The answer formed before I could stop it. Because I hadn't been there. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. A dull ache settled in my chest, not panic, not fear, but something heavier. Guilt. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the sky, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever waited for me at the end of this drive wasn't just about my son. It was about the man I'd been pretending to be, and the one I was about to become. Stability is a convincing lie when you repeat it often enough. As I drove through the empty streets, the word kept circling my mind like it was trying to justify something. Stable job. Stable marriage. Stable routine. I'd used it for years as proof that I was doing life right. That I was being responsible. That whatever cracks existed were normal wear and tear. The truth was harder to admit. I'd chosen stability because it asked less of me. My life, from the outside, looked exactly like something you'd work toward in your 30s. Mid-level management. A paycheck that cleared on time. A house that felt more like a checkpoint than a dream. I wasn't failing. I just wasn't winning either. I told myself that was adulthood. The road curved and muscle memory took over. I could drive to my in-laws' place without GPS. We'd made the trip dozens of times. Holidays. Weekends when work ran late. It's good for him, my wife always said. He needs family. Family. The word felt heavier tonight. I thought about my wife, how confident she sounded whenever she talked about her parents. Like their approval was a badge she'd earned early and never questioned. She trusted them completely. More than she trusted me sometimes. That should have bothered me more than it did. When we argued, which we did quietly and efficiently, it was usually about time. My lack of it. Her frustration with always carrying the emotional load. She'd say things like, "You're here, but you're not present." I'd nod, promise to do better, then bury myself in work the next morning. Work was easier. Work had rules. If you showed up, stayed late, and didn't complain, you were rewarded with the illusion of progress. Parenting didn't work that way. I remembered the first time she suggested leaving our son with her parents for a whole week. I hesitated. Not because I distrusted them, but because a part of me felt replaced. "He loves it there," she'd said. "And you're slammed anyway." She wasn't wrong. I was always slammed. Always one deadline away from breathing room that never came. I'd agreed. That decision echoed now, louder than the engine. My phone sat face up in the cup holder. No new notifications. No missed calls. I resisted the urge to call my son back. He told me not to say anything out loud. I didn't know who might be listening. That thought alone should have scared me more than it did. Instead, it unlocked a series of memories I'd dismissed too easily. Like the way my son's voice dropped when he talked about his grandfather. Not fear exactly. More like caution. Or how he never complained, but stopped asking questions there. Stopped pushing boundaries the way kids are supposed to. I'd noticed it once. Maybe twice. Then convinced myself it was discipline. Structure. The kind adults praise because it looks like obedience. I told myself boys needed firmness. I told myself a lot of things. The car clock ticked forward. For 12 a.m. The sky was still dark, but thinner now. Like night was losing its grip. I thought about the last conversation I'd had with my wife before she went to bed. It had been short. Polite. Tired. "Don't forget," she'd said, brushing her teeth. "Dad's taking him to school tomorrow." I'd nodded, half listening. "Okay." She paused at the doorway. "You worry too much about them." I almost laughed at that memory. Had I worried too much? Or not enough? At a red light, I rubbed my eyes and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked older than I felt. Or maybe I felt older than I was supposed to. 36, with a face that had learned how to stay neutral even when things went wrong. My son didn't have that skill yet. That's why his fear came through so clearly. I realized something uncomfortable then. If I'd been more present, he wouldn't have needed a 3 a.m. call to reach me. The light turned green. I didn't move right away. Cars didn't exist at this hour. Neither did excuses. I accelerated, the guilt sitting beside me like a silent passenger. By the time I turned onto their street, the houses looked identical. Neat lawns, closed curtains, perfectly respectable lives. Nothing about the place suggested danger. That's what made it worse. Threats don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they wear familiarity. I parked a few houses down, unsure why I didn't pull straight into the driveway. Instinct, maybe. Or the part of me that finally understood this wasn't a casual visit. As I sat there, engine idling, another memory surfaced. My son, months ago, asking me out of nowhere, "Dad, what does trust mean?" I'd smiled then. Gave him a safe, simple answer. It means believing people will take care of you. He'd nodded, unsatisfied. I hadn't followed up. I shut off the engine. The sudden silence rang in my ears. Whatever stability I thought I'd built had depended on not looking too closely. On assuming that because things weren't loud, they were fine. My son's call shattered that illusion. I opened the car door and stepped into the cool air. As I walked toward the house, one thought anchored itself in my chest. If this was the life I'd accepted as stable, then it was time to find out what it was costing my child. And whether I was finally willing to pay attention. Silence feels different once you know it's been chosen. As I stood across the street from my in-laws' house, I realized how quiet everything was, not just the neighborhood, but inside my own head. The panic that had fueled the drive here had burned itself out, replaced by something colder. Sharper. The kind of focus you don't notice until it settles in. The house looked the same as always. White siding. Trimmed hedges. Curtains drawn with deliberate neatness. It was the kind of place people described as good. Respectable. That word again. I crossed the street slowly, every step measured. I wasn't sneaking, but I wasn't announcing myself either. Somewhere along the way, I understood that whatever my son had tried to tell me wasn't going to reveal itself all at once. It was going to come in fragments. Books. Pauses. Things not said. I rang the doorbell. It chimed cheerfully, too cheerfully for the hour. A few seconds passed. Then footsteps. Heavy. Unhurried. The door opened to my father-in-law's face, already set in mild irritation. "You're early," he said, glancing past me at the street, as if checking for witnesses. "I needed to see my son," I replied. He studied me for a moment. Not angry. Assessing. Then he stepped aside. "He's asleep." "So am I most nights," I said. Didn't stop him from calling me. That did it. Something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, masked quickly into something else. "Children imagine things," he said, "especially when they miss their parents." I stepped inside. The house smelled like disinfectant and old furniture. Everything had its place. Too much of a place. The kind of order that didn't invite questions. My mother-in-law appeared from the kitchen, wrapped in a cardigan, her smile already practiced. "Oh, you startled us," she said. "Is everything okay?" I nodded. "I'm here to take him." Her smile hesitated. "Take him where?" "Home." She glanced at her husband. A look passed between them, quick, efficient. "Well," she said gently, "let's not wake him unnecessarily." "I'll decide that." The words surprised even me. She blinked, then recovered. "Of course. We just want what's best for him." "So do I thought. The difference was, I was finally willing to ask what that meant. They led me down the hallway. Family photos lined the walls. My wife as a child. Smiling. Obedient. Still. That's when it hit me. I'd seen that stillness before. In my son. His bedroom door was half open. I pushed it gently. He was awake. Sitting up. Waiting. The relief on his face when he saw me wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like something unclenched. "Hey," I said softly. He didn't answer. He slid out of bed and walked straight to me, pressing his forehead into my stomach. No words. Just contact. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling how tense he was. Like he'd been holding himself together for too long. "You okay?" I asked. The pause. Then a nod that meant almost nothing. Behind me, my father-in-law cleared his throat. "He's been emotional lately." I didn't turn around. Kids get that way when they don't feel safe. The room went still. My son's fingers tightened in my shirt. I crouched down to his level. "Can we talk?" I asked him quietly. His eyes flicked past me. To the doorway. I followed his gaze. "They can wait," I said, standing up again. "We're going for a walk." My mother-in-law smiled tightly. "It's cold." I brought a jacket. Outside, the morning air was sharp. The sky was lightening now, the world pretending everything was normal. My son walked beside me, hands stuffed into his pockets, shoulders hunched. We didn't speak at first. I let the silence stretch. Because for the first time, I understood it wasn't empty. It was protective. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said finally. He stopped walking. I turned to face him. His eyes filled instantly. "They said you'd be mad," he whispered. My chest tightened. "Mad at who?" "At me." I knelt in front of him. "Listen to me. Whatever you tell me, I can handle it." He hesitated. Swallowed. Looked back at the house. "They get quiet when they're angry," he said. Like you're supposed to know what you did." I felt something harden in my chest. "They say things," he continued, "about being ungrateful. About how you don't understand because you're not here." The words stung. "They tell me not to talk about it," he said. "They say it's family stuff." Family stuff. That phrase had buried more truths than any lie ever could. I reached out and took his hands. "You did the right thing calling me." His shoulders sagged just a little. "I was scared," he said. "But I didn't know what else to do." I pulled him into a hug, this time holding on tighter. As we stood there, I realized something that shifted everything. This wasn't about something that happened once. It was about something that had been happening quietly, repeatedly. By the time we turned back toward the house, the sun was fully rising. And for the first time since my son had called me, the silence finally made sense. It hadn't been empty. It had been a warning. Some places don't threaten you outright. They convince you that you're the problem for feeling uneasy. As my son and I stepped back into the house, I felt it immediately, the shift. Not louder. Not angrier. Just tighter. Like the walls had leaned in a fraction when we were gone. The air carried that same sterile smell, but now it felt intentional, as if cleanliness itself were a form of control. My father-in-law was standing by the kitchen counter, hands folded, posture straight. He didn't ask where we'd been. He didn't ask how my son was feeling. He just watched us re-enter his domain. "You should have said something," he said, calm and measured. "We didn't know you were stepping out." I met his eyes. I didn't need permission. That earned me a look. Gone as quickly as it appeared. My mother-in-law busied herself with a kettle that didn't need boiling. The performance was familiar now, movement without purpose, noise without substance. A way to fill space so nothing real had to surface. "Breakfast?" she asked brightly. "He eats better when there's routine." My son shifted closer to me. "No, thank you," I said. "We won't be staying long." Silence followed. Not the awkward kind. The strategic kind. My father-in-law finally spoke. "Children need structure. They need to know who's in charge." I waited. "And lately," he continued, "he's been testing limits." I looked down at my son. His eyes were fixed on the floor, shoulders drawn in. He already knew this script. Knew where it went. "What does testing limits look like to you?" I asked. My mother-in-law laughed softly. "Oh, questions. Becca. Wanting explanations for everything." I felt my jaw tighten. "He's 7, I thought. That's called being 7. My father-in-law nodded. "Respect comes before understanding." That was the sentence. The one that told me exactly what kind of house this was. I'd heard it before. From managers who confused authority with leadership. From men who mistook silence for agreement. And how do you teach that? I asked. They exchanged another look. My father-in-law answered. By being consistent. Consistent. I noticed then how my son flinched, not visibly but internally, like his body recognized the word before his mind did. Consistency doesn't require fear, I said. My father-in-law's mouth tightened. Fear is your interpretation. I stepped closer, placing a hand on my son's shoulder. He relaxed just enough to tell me he'd noticed. You don't get to define how he feels, I said. Especially not when I'm standing right here. The room held its breath. My mother-in-law cleared her throat. We raised our daughter just fine. I didn't miss the implication. She learned discipline, she added. She learned respect. I thought of my wife. Her hesitation when conflict appeared. Her instinct to appease before confront. Her need for approval that never quite faded. I wondered how much of that had been learned right here. I'm sure you believe that, I said. But this is my son. My father-in-law straightened. And while he's under our roof. He isn't, I cut in. The words came out firmer than I expected. Not loud. Just final. He's here because I allowed it. That doesn't transfer authority. My son's fingers curled into my sleeve. You're overreacting, my mother-in-law said quickly. He had a bad night. Children say things. I nodded. They do. Especially when they're afraid. That word again, my father-in-law said. You keep projecting. No, I said. I'm listening. I crouched slightly, bringing myself closer to my son's height without breaking eye contact with his grandfather. Do you feel safe here? My son froze. Every adult instinct in that room pressed down on him at once. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I think we're done, I said, standing up. My father-in-law's voice hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said. But it'll be mine. I turned toward the hallway to get my son's bag. My mother-in-law followed, whispering urgently. Please don't do this. You're upsetting him. I stopped and looked at her. He was upset long before I arrived. She opened her mouth, then closed it. In the bedroom, I helped my son pack. Each folded shirt felt like reclaiming something that should never have been taken. Are you in trouble? He asked quietly. I met his eyes. No. I am. When we stepped back into the living room, the house felt smaller. Less certain of itself. As we reached the door, my father-in-law spoke one last time. If you walk out like this, things will change. I paused. I hope so, I said. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Like we'd broken some unspoken rule. As we walked to the car, I realized something with startling clarity. This house hadn't just felt wrong. It had trained everyone inside it to doubt themselves. And I wasn't going to let it train my son. Not anymore. The hardest truths don't come out all at once. They arrive in pieces when the body finally believes it's safe enough to speak. We sat in the car with the engine off. The house behind us looked unchanged, windows still, curtains closed, perfectly ordinary. If I hadn't been inside, I might have believed nothing was wrong. That was the most dangerous part. From the outside, everything made sense. Inside the car, nothing did. My son sat in the passenger seat, feet dangling above the floor, hands folded in his lap like he was waiting to be told what to do next. I didn't rush him. I'd already rushed enough years away. The silence stretched. I didn't fill it. Finally, I said, "You're not going back there today." His shoulders dropped just a little. "Okay," he whispered. I turned toward him. "I need you to know something before you tell me anything else." He looked up, eyes wide, searching. "No one is in trouble for telling the truth," I said. "Not you." "Not me." He nodded, but didn't speak. I waited. "It's not like hitting," he said eventually. "They don't do that." I felt a sharp, unwanted relief, and immediately hated myself for it. "Go on," I said. "They make rules," he continued. "A lot of them. And they change." I frowned. "Change how?" "Like, you're supposed to know," he said. "If you ask, they get quiet." "Quiet." The word again. They don't yell much, he said. They just stop talking to you. Or they look at you like you disappointed them. I felt my jaw tighten. They say you have to earn being listened to, he added. By behaving. Behaving how? He hesitated, not asking why. That landed heavier than I expected. They say you talk too much, he said, voice smaller now. They say you let me get away with things because you're not around. There was. The part meant for me. They say if I don't listen, you'll be upset. That you don't like trouble. My chest constricted. I stared at the steering wheel, the leather worn smooth where my hands always rested. I taught him that. Not with words, but with absence. They tell me I make things hard, he said. And then they don't talk to me for a long time. How long? I asked. He shrugged. Until I say sorry. For what? He shook his head. They don't say. I closed my eyes. This wasn't discipline. This was control. And when you called me, I said carefully, what made you do it? He picked at a loose thread on his sleeve. Grandpa said, if you came here again, it would be because I lied. My stomach dropped. He said families don't tell outsiders, my son continued. He said you wouldn't understand. Do you think that? I asked quietly. He looked at me then. Really looked. I didn't, he said. But I wasn't sure. That hurt more than anything else he could have said. I should have been sure, I replied. That's on me. He leaned his head against the window. I didn't want Mom to be mad. There was. The final lock. They said she agrees with them, he said. They said she turned out fine. I thought of my wife again. Her careful words. Her need to smooth things over. Her instinct to explain things away. She loves you, I said, choosing the truth that wouldn't break him. But love doesn't always mean seeing clearly. He nodded as if that made sense. Did you feel scared there? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, I felt like I was always about to do something wrong. That was it. Fear didn't always look like terror. Sometimes it looked like vigilance. I reached across the console and took his hand. You don't have to live like that. He squeezed back. I thought if I was better it would stop, he said. My throat tightened. You were never the problem. We sat there for a moment, the weight of that truth settling between us. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner, I said. He shrugged, but his grip tightened again. I'm here now, I added. And I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. He nodded, eyes finally wet. Not panicked. Relieved. As I started the engine, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about protecting my son. It was about confronting the part of myself that had chosen quiet over clarity. As we pulled away from the house, I knew one thing with certainty. The truth had been spoken. And once spoken, it doesn't go back into silence. Some decisions wait patiently. They sit in the background of your life, letting you believe you're choosing comfort, when really, you're choosing delay. My wife called while we were halfway home. I watched the phone light up on the dashboard, her name glowing against the dim interior of the car. For a moment, I considered letting it ring. Not because I was afraid of the conversation, but because I already knew how it would go. I answered anyway. Where are you? She asked. No greeting, no softness. Straight to control. On the road, I said. With him. There was a pause. Why? I kept my eyes on the road. Because he asked me to come. Another pause. Longer this time. You shouldn't have gone over there like that, she said. You made it worse. I exhaled slowly. Worse for who? For everyone, she snapped. Dad is upset. Mom's crying. You embarrassed them. I felt something in me finally settle. Not anger. Clarity. He was scared, I said. Our son was scared. She scoffed. He's dramatic. You know that. They're strict, not abusive. The word hung there. Abusive. I glanced at my son. He was staring out the window, pretending not to listen. His shoulders were tense. Did you ask him? I said. She hesitated. Ask him what? How he feels there. Silence. That's not how families work, she said finally. You don't interrogate children. I tightened my grip on the wheel. You listen to them. You're overthinking this, she said. You always do. There was the sentence she used whenever I stopped smoothing things over. I'm thinking clearly for the first time, I said. And I need you to do something hard. She laughed bitterly. You're the one making it hard. I need you to choose him, I said. The line went quiet. Don't do this, she said softly now. Don't turn this into sides. I swallowed. It already is. Her voice sharpened. They're my parents. And he's our child. The words felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. You're asking me to betray them, she said. No, I replied. I'm asking you to protect him. She sighed, the sound weary and familiar. They raised me just fine. I closed my eyes for a split second. That's not the proof you think it is, I said. She went silent again. When she spoke, her voice was cold. If you keep pushing this, you're going to break something. I thought of my son sitting beside me. Quiet. Alert. I know, I said. I already have. We pulled into our driveway. I put the car in park but didn't hang up. I'm not sending him back there, I said. Not until we sort this out. You can't just decide that, she said. We're married. Yes, I said. And this is me acting like it matters. She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. You're choosing a fight over nothing. I looked at the house we'd built together. The life we'd maintained carefully, like fragile glass. I'm choosing my son, I said. Her breath caught. If you do this, she said, things won't go back to normal. I finally turned toward the passenger seat. My son met my eyes, uncertainty flickering there. I don't want normal, I said. I want honest. I ended the call. The silence that followed was loud, but it wasn't empty. I turned to my son. None of this is your fault. He nodded slowly. Some adults avoid hard conversations because they're afraid, I said. That doesn't make you wrong. He leaned back in his seat, exhaling for what felt like the first time all morning. As we went inside, I understood the truth I'd been circling for years. I had spent my life trying to keep everything intact. But keeping things intact had meant letting the wrong things break. Tonight I finally chose. And there was no going back. There's a moment when fear stops asking questions. It doesn't disappear. It just steps aside. That moment came for me sometime after sunrise, when the house finally woke up and the weight of what I'd done settled into my bones. My son was in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, watching cartoons he wasn't really paying attention to. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked toward me, checking. I stayed where he could see me. My phone buzzed again. And again. Messages this time. From my wife. From her parents. The kind of texts that pretend calm while pushing urgency underneath. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. You're making this worse than it is. I set the phone face down on the table. For years, those words would have pulled me back into line. Made me apologize for tone. For timing. For being inconvenient. Not today. By mid-morning, there was a knock at the door. From controlled. Familiar. I felt my son stiffen. I met his eyes and nodded once. I've got this. I opened the door. My father-in-law stood on the porch, posture straight, jaw set. My mother-in-law hovered a step behind him, eyes already shining with rehearsed concern. We need to discuss this, my father-in-law said. Like adults. We are, I replied, stepping outside and closing the door behind me. That surprised him. My mother-in-law frowned. Why are you shutting us out? I didn't raise my voice. Because this conversation isn't for him to overhear. They exchanged a glance. You don't get to make unilateral decisions, my father-in-law said. This affects the whole family. I nodded. Exactly. He inhaled sharply. You're reacting emotionally. You always were sensitive. There was the familiar dismissal, dressed up as wisdom. I'm reacting responsibly, I said. And this isn't a discussion. It's a boundary. My mother-in-law stepped forward. We love him. We've done nothing but care for him. I don't doubt that you believe that, I said. But love doesn't override impact. My father-in-law's eyes narrowed. You're accusing us of things you can't prove. I met his stare. I'm responding to what my son feels. That's not evidence, he snapped. It's enough, I said. Silence stretched between us. Cars passed in the distance. Somewhere, a lawnmower started up, life going on like nothing mattered. You're turning him against us, my mother-in-law said softly. I shook my head. No. I'm teaching him he doesn't have to earn safety. My father-in-law scoffed. You think you're some kind of hero now? I considered that. No, I said. I think I'm late. That landed. You will regret this, he said. Families don't survive this kind of disrespect. I felt the old urge rise, the instinct to soften, to negotiate. I let it pass. Families don't survive silence either, I said. And I won't raise my son inside it. My mother-in-law's voice broke. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. Space. And accountability. My father-in-law laughed once, sharp and humorless. You're asking us to change. Yes, I said. Another pause. Then his face hardened. Then we're done here. I nodded. For now. They turned and walked back toward their car. My mother-in-law looked back once, like she expected me to stop them. I didn't. When I went back inside, my son was standing just beyond the doorway. Are they mad? He asked. Yes, I said. He swallowed. At me. I crouched in front of him. Me. And that's okay. His shoulders loosened. You did nothing wrong, I said. You did something brave. He nodded slowly, absorbing that. As the door closed behind us, I felt something settle into place. This was what standing looked like. Not shouting. Not winning. Just refusing to move when it mattered. And for the first time, I knew exactly where I belonged. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. I was already awake when the light began to change. Not because I'd slept badly, though I had, but because my body no longer trusted rest the way it used to. Too much had shifted overnight. When that happens, sleep feels like a risk. The house was quiet. Not the tense quiet from before. This was different. Open. Honest. The kind of quiet that comes after something heavy has been named and set down. My son was asleep on the couch, still wrapped in the blanket from yesterday. His face looked younger when he slept. Softer. Like the vigilance had finally loosened its grip. I watched the slow rise and fall of his chest for a long moment, letting myself feel something I hadn't allowed in years. Relief. Not the kind that celebrates. The kind that exhales. I made coffee and stood by the window while it brewed, staring out at a neighborhood that looked unchanged. The same cars. The same trees. The same illusion of normalcy. It struck me how often life keeps moving even when everything inside you has been rearranged. My phone sat on the counter. Silent for once. I knew that wouldn't last. There were conversations ahead, hard ones. With my wife. With lawyers, maybe. With people who would tell me I'd overreacted or misread things or broken something that didn't need breaking. I was ready now. Because I finally understood what breaking actually was. It wasn't confrontation. It was letting a child believe his fear didn't matter. My son stirred, blinking awake. He looked around, momentarily disoriented, then relaxed when he saw me. Morning, I said quietly. Morning, he replied, sitting up. He hesitated. Are they coming back? I shook my head. Not today. He nodded, absorbing that. Okay. He didn't ask when. That told me everything. I sat beside him on the couch. For a while, neither of us spoke. The television flickered on mute, colors moving without sound. I let the silence stay. Finally, he said, You didn't yell. I turned to him. About what? Yesterday, he said. At them. I smiled slightly. Did you want me to? He thought about it. Then shook his head. No. It was better like that. I nodded. Yelling doesn't always mean you're strong. He leaned back against the cushion. You stayed. The words hit me harder than any accusation could have. Yes, I said. I did. Are you going to leave again? He asked, not accusing. Just asking. I took a breath. This mattered. I'll still go to work, I said. But I won't disappear. And I won't ignore things that feel wrong. Not with you. He studied my face, checking for honesty. Okay, he said. Simple. Later that morning, my wife came home. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at us like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. Her eyes were tired, guarded, not angry, not soft, uncertain. We didn't argue. We didn't reconcile either. We talked quietly, carefully, about what had happened, about what hadn't, about what she'd learned to normalize and what I'd learned to avoid. There were no neat conclusions. Just truths laid out between us, uncomfortable and necessary. Some things cracked further. Others finally breathed. That night after my son went to bed, really to bed this time, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt different now. Less performative. More real. I thought about the man I'd been before the phone rang at 3:07 a.m. A man who believed being good meant being agreeable. A man who thought provision could replace presence. A man who mistook silence for peace. I didn't hate that man. He'd done the best he knew how. But I didn't want to be him anymore. Growth doesn't always feel like improvement. Sometimes it feels like loss. Of certainty. Of approval. Of the story you told yourself about who you were. I was okay with that now. Before turning in for the night, I checked on my son one last time. He was asleep on his back, one arm flung over his head, breathing deep and even. I stood there longer than necessary. Not because I was afraid to leave, but because I didn't want to miss the moment. I understood something then that I wished I'd learned sooner. Fatherhood isn't proven in emergencies. It's proven in what you do after. In the quiet mornings. In the uncomfortable conversations. In the choice to stay present when it would be easier to retreat. As I turned off the light, a calm settled over me, not certainty, not victory, but something better. Clarity. Whatever came next, I would meet it awake. And this time, I wouldn't wait for a 3 a.m. call to listen.